Alright, this will be an overview of Lesson 1-4, Unit 1, Lesson 4 for your homework. The whole lesson revolves around comparing different fractions, and I've listed three methods to compare fractions. First, you could draw a comparison bar model. Second, you could use equivalent fractions with like denominators. And the last one is, and it's probably the simplest, is to use cross multiplication to determine which fraction is greater. The first problem on the homework is asking you to compare 5/7 and 5/6. So I've decided to use the strategy of comparing with like denominators. So you find all the multiples of 6, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, and 42. And the multiples of 7, 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, and 42. You definitely need to know your multiplication math facts to do this strategy. But if you see those two, you find that there is a common denominator of 42, and you can convert both of these fractions into 40-seconds. So in order to find equivalent fractions, both with a common denominator of 42, you multiply the 7 times 6 to get 42, and what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 5 times 6 is 30. So 5/7 is equivalent to 30 40-seconds, and this would be a times 7 times 7, and that would give you 35 40-seconds. You can see that 35 40-seconds is greater than 30 40-seconds, so you would say 5/7 is less than 5/6. Here I'm showing cross multiplication as the third strategy. What you do is you multiply the denominator times the numerator of the other fraction and get the total, and the denominator times the numerator of the other fraction and write the total. And you can see here that 30 is less than 35. That would mean that 5/7 is less than 5/6. This next problem is asking you to compare 1/3 and 1/9. Because they're both unit fractions, it's very, very easy to compare them. The greater the distance between the numerator and denominator, the smaller the fraction, because it's a much smaller part. You can see 1/3 here. I've made two comparison bar models, and 1/3 there and 1/9 there, so you can easily see that 1/3 is a much greater part than 1/9. If you had 1/3 of a pizza, that would be much more than if you had 1/9 of a pizza. Similarly to the first problem, I've used a strategy of finding equivalent fractions with like denominators. So I do the multiples of 5 and the multiples of 7, and then you multiply the denominator by a number, a multiplier 7, to get 35. And you have to do what you did at the bottom, you do to the top. You get 2 times 7 is 14. So you end up with 14 35ths. And doing the same strategy this, you get 10 35ths. So you can see that 14 out of 35 is more than 10 out of 35. So 2/5 would be greater than 2/7. For this problem, I did cross multiplication. 4 times 2 is 8, and 3 times 1 is 3. So you know that this fraction over on this side is greater than this fraction on this side, so 1/4 is going to be less than 2/3. You could also use other strategies to solve this, like equivalent fractions, turning fourths and thirds into 12ths, and comparing like fractions that way. This problem I decided to do comparison bar model because it was easy to draw 7/8 and 5/14. You can see that 7 parts out of 8 parts is going to be much greater than 5 parts out of 14 parts. The trick to this is make sure you're drawing parts that are similar in size so you can compare them. With the equivalent fraction method on this, multiples of 5 and multiples of 4 gave me a common denominator of 20, and then I converted both fractions into 20ths, and these were very close, but you can see that 16 20ths is going to be just slightly greater than 15 20ths. So 4/5 is going to be greater than 3/5. So here we have a word problem. It's always good to unpack these problems by drawing pictures. Julie lives 3/5 mile from school. Madeline lives 1/13 mile from school. Select the girl that lives closer to the school. So I'm going to draw a picture that represents this problem. So I've drawn comparison bar models to find out if I could just use a picture to tell me if it's closer, and I've done 3/5 here, You can see I have 3/5 here, and down here I've done 8/13. It looks like the 3/5 is a little bit closer, but I cannot trust my drawing because it's not perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and use another model. I'm going to go ahead and do the common denominator of 65 because the common multiples of 5 and 13, the lowest common one would be 65. So I multiply 5 times 13 to get 65, and 3 times 13 to get 39. And for Madeline, I do 13 times 5 to get 65, and 8 times 5 to get 40. So I can see here that 39/65 is just 1/65 shorter, but it is shorter than Madeline, so Julie lives just a little bit closer to school than Madeline does. This final problem is pretty easy because you already have like denominators of ninths, so I drew a comparison bar model showing that Julio's is 4/9, so this shows 4/9 right here, and Paula is 2/9 right there, and it's obvious that 2 parts out of 9 is going to be less than 4 parts out of 9. So I would say that Julio's trail mix recipe has more almonds than Paula's. And that's that for this lesson. Again, reviewing it, you had comparison bar model. If you can draw it, you can do cross multiplication to compare the different fractions, or you can compare them using like fractions with a common denominator. Make sure you ask for help from your teacher and pressing the step-by-step model or view example if you're stuck on any problems.